Welcome to Whisky.com, where fine spirits meet. And today I'm on a windy day in the town of Ellon, which is kind of on the east, nearly the east coast, near Aberdeen. And I'm here at the brewery of BrewDog, and they make excellent beer. They started off 15 years ago with a bit of a craft distilling going on, and they grew a lot because they make really good beer. And now they have a brewery in America, one in Berlin, one in Australia, and a lot of bars all around the world. Yeah, and they sell really good beer. I have IPAs and all these kind of new style beers that are really, really tasty. And they just started a few years ago making whiskey as well. We know they're making whiskey, but they haven't come out with a whiskey yet. So I know that the process of beer and whiskey at the beginning with mashing and fermenting is pretty similar. So let's see if they can really make a good whiskey. If you're thinking about craft beer, you usually think about like one guy in a garage and just mixing stuff and really not looking at hygiene or analytics, just fiddling around. But this is really wrong. This BrewDog distillery is a lot more professional than you might think. So they do a lot of analytics. They have a whole laboratory to do analytics of quality control, but also experiments. And I want to show you one thing that is used for whiskey. You can use it as in the wash after fermentation, or as in of the new make. And you can do the chromatography. So this is basically you take your sample, you accelerate it really fast, you shoot it at a target, and then you divert it. And depending on the mass of the molecules, they are being diverted more or less. So that what you get is a diversion spectrum. So the more mass, the more it gets not deflected. The lighter, the more it gets deflected. So then you can analyze really what is in your sample on a computer screen. And this machine is really cool because when you have the sample and you've analyzed what is in there, you can actually push a button and then it sprays you with the sample, so you can smell it and realize, okay, this peak smells like that. And with that, you can really analyze what you've just done in an experiment. So you see, okay, I've used that yeast, that temperature, it made this peak, smells like that. Okay, I want to replicate that with that peak, but I'm trying to remove some other peaks that I don't like with. And you can approach that very analytically and very scientifically, and don't just mess around and say, oh, it's all magic, but it's science. So this is really very interesting. And this will be very interesting when the experiments of the BrewDog whiskey come out. As the BrewDog distillery has also the BrewDog brewery, they have like a really nice process for their malt. And as the BrewDog is really a craft brewery, they have a lot of different ingredients. They have huge containers outside with pale malt, but they can mix a lot of different malts in there. You have chocolate malt, you have roasted malt, that is the one from the stout. So you can just spice in some other flavors that is just different to other distilleries. So they are really innovative, really experimental. So what you have outside, 40 tons of pale malt, then here you have 1 tons bags that are for more in mixing, and you can even do a little experiments with 25 kilo sacks of malt. So this is a really good starting point for an innovative process. So the grist comes in here and it's getting mashed in, so it's getting mixed with water and stirred regularly. And what you do want to have is you want to have the enzymes working, so you want to have it hot. So there is a steam jacket that heats it up continuously. They start at around 55. Different grains or different malts, they take different temperatures, so it can go lower, can go higher where you start, and you take it up to about 80 degrees Celsius in a continuous mashing and heating process. This converts all the starches to all the sugars, so you have a really, really sugary substance. The lautering, the taking out of the water, the separating the solids from the liquids, is actually done in a separate tank, the lauter tun, and that is very similar to what we know for most of the distilleries. And it separates the draft from the wort, and the wort is then continued in the process. So the distillery tried to do a rye whiskey, and they did it like normal single malt process. The problem with rye is there are substances in there that make they are like a bit of like a glue. Don't taste like a glue, they taste good, but they act like a glue, so you have really a doughy substance. And if you put that in a normal lauter tun, then the husks can't form a bed that would act as a sieve, and through the normal sieve you can extract the water. This does not work with rye whiskey. It forms a dough, blocks everything, and you would take weeks to get the water out. So this is really impossible to do. So what you do is you have normal mashing, and then you put it through a mash filter, which they acquired then just for that. And with that you can easily filter out the solids from the liquids and have your nice mash with the high rye content. So the brewing process, the wash backs, the creation of the alcohol and also the flavors is something somewhat different here. What they do is they have a process after they've created the wort, and that is sterilization. So they actually heat up the wort to 100 degrees Celsius, so all of the bacteria are dead. And they use stainless steel tanks, so they don't have any lactobacteria that would be living in wood or would be in the wort. So they have a clean process, and they really want to just have the yeast working. Lactobacteria creates lactic acid. You might know that from yogurt, or if you're German, from sauerkraut. And that is really acidic. And that you have that in the wash that you'd have in the normal Scotch whiskey. So without that lactobacteria, you only have the flavors that are created by the yeast. Currently they're using a Belgian ale yeast, but they want to do a big experimentation of a lot of different yeasts. So for the standard, they have 2 times 80,000 liters of fermentation tanks, which they do for 100 hours and get about 9%. But then they also do have smaller tanks with about 10,000 liters of volume. I think 5 or 6 of them, and there they can try out a lot of different yeasts and try out how these flavors might be even better. So they might find another yeast that just suits them a lot better, and try a lot of nice experiments. So I'm really excited about how that's going to turn out, and let's head on and see how that is distilled. This is the new still house of BrewDog. They used to be in the normal distillery brewery, but now they moved out of the brewery and now they have a proper still house, and it's really a proper still house. I haven't seen that many different stills in one building at a time. So they have a huge column still and something to purify their methanol out of the vodka for the vodka production. Doesn't concern us that much. They have a medium still and a very small still for experimentation for the gin. And we are having a look at these 3 stills. They are for the whiskey production. And they have steam, not coils, but a steam jacket, which is a bit different to the normal ones. But steam is really good for heating. So the wash still, 10,000 liters. Wash runs through it pretty quickly. They have a lot of reflux bowls there, a lot of copper contact. In the lower ABV, it's not as influential, but so they can run it pretty fast. But still, they have a lot of copper contact. They could do a few experiments. What happens if you do your wash slower? And then you have 2 spirit stills. For their standard, they're looking at a double distillation, but they said, they're gonna try some triple distillation as well. So you have the first one, which has 3 big reflux bowls, a lot of copper contact. You could also do a rectifier in there, so that rectifier increases the reflux by a lot. So you could even make it more pure, more lighter. And so they could run it pretty fast to have a heavier spirit as well. The last spirit still, also 3,000 liters, is looking more like a traditional Scottish still, lamp-shaped constriction at the middle, has a fairly good amount of reflux compared to the 3 reflux bowls. It's a bit less, but this is the spirit still. You could also activate a rectifier in there depending on the style that you want. talking about the style that they want to do. For 90% of their whiskey, which will be the standard, the rye and the single malt, they want to do more of a tropical fruitiness and a lightness. Probably for the malt, the rye will be more like a rye. And then you have the 10% of experimentation. Really, they want to go into a lot of different directions. So you can tweak a lot of things here. You can activate different rectifiers. You can run it faster. You can run it slower. You have tons of possibilities, different stills, triple distillation, double distillation. So there is really a lot of possibilities to change that, and they really want to do that in the future. So yeah, in terms of their normal style, a bit more fruity, a bit more tropical, a bit more light. So this is what we can expect for when the whiskey comes out. You guessed the thing with the warehouse is experimentation. Yes, they have a really innovative spirit around here at BrewDog. So the warehouse on the site is pretty cool. You have a climate control. You can heat, you can cool, and you can actually adjust the humidity. So currently it's, I would say, normal, but they have just upped the humidity. So every now and then you hear the bit of spraying of water, haze down here, so the humidity is a bit higher. So this also goes a little bit into the experimenting direction. So yes, you can control the environment here. You can recreate pretty much any climate zone on the planet. And they can vary a lot with casks as well and do experiments there. One thing I've just got to know there was they're trying something with new casks. But the problem with new casks is if you have a new cask, it is very strong. So you put your whiskey in and it takes a lot of tannins out there. With American oak, a lot of vanilla, and with European oak, it's a bit of a bacon and other stuff, and also bitterness. And what they did is they said, okay, let's take our neutral alcohol, our vodka, like 96%, where nothing is in there per definition, and no flavors, and just fill them in there, leave them in there a little bit, just take out some of the unwanted flavors from the cask, take it out, and there is nothing that spoiled the cask with its own flavor. If you take a refill cask, then you have all the flavors from what you've put inside before, but inside the stuff that has been inside before there. But with the neutral alcohol, you can just put it in, take something out, redistill it, make more nothing tasting, and then you have a little bit of a weaker, fresh cask, and that's what they are maturing it now in. So really interesting theory behind that. So they really got a depth into thinking about what we can do with the whiskey. The standard whiskey is mostly then matured off-site, normal Scottish climate, and they want to go like 25% bourbon and a mixture of sherry and port wine like Tawny or Madeira or something like that. Masala. I don't know. So that is then the process of making the BrewDog whiskey. At time of filming this, there is no whiskey out yet. We're still waiting for the first whiskey, but maybe we can try some new make, try something that has been matured here. So let's have a look what we get today. So this was it, and now we're having a little tasting with Master Distiller Stephen Kersley.
Hi.
You've been 16 years in the business.
Yes.
In the whiskey business, and you're now Master Distiller, and already, what was it, 8 years? No. 8 years here at the distillery, and you've already set it up. Mm-hmm. So first of all, thank you very much for having us here.
Very welcome. Thank you for coming.
But I have tons of questions. So how was the setting up of that distillery? I mean, that is just such a interesting place.
So we set out with a very clear mission, which was to create a design for a distillery which was capable of distilling any styles of whiskey and any styles of spirit that we wanted. So from single malt Scotch whiskey to single grain Scotch whiskey to rum to vodka to gin, we really wanted to just be able to create a distillery where we could have no limitations.
Okay, that is cool, and I don't see any limitations yet.
We've got so many levers and tunes that we could play on creating flavor. It's great.
Okay, so and also we have something from clear to brown. So what are you having today?
So we're going to start off with 2 new makes, okay?
Okay.
These have been distilled in the last 3 months. This is our latest single malt recipe. And this is our latest single grain, which is very rye forward in terms of the grain bill. Let's start with the single malt.
Okay.
So this is 100% malt barley, as you would expect. And the key with this new make spirit is that the yeast that we've used during the fermentation is a Belgian ale strain from the Le Trappe brewery in Belgium. So the kind of Belgian ale style produces a lot of phenolic compounds, a lot of long chain fruity esters, and we really wanted to concentrate them in the new make to understand how they were going to impact the flavour of the whiskey during its maturation. So taking this to the nose, this is 63.5%, which is where we're
Barreling strength.
barreling strength,
Or
yeah.
casking strength.
Yeah.
Still in Scotland. Oh, I love it. It's very, very fresh.
Super fresh. Lots
fresh.
of stone fruits, like dark fruits. Things like for me, I get a lot of the kind of apricots, peaches, and then there's a backbone of maltiness, malty biscuity aroma, grain. That's super important, because what we want to try and do is give the grain a platform to give its own flavour to the overall flavour profile.
It's the pale malt.
Exactly, yes.
Oh, okay, nice. What I find interesting is that the thing that you're doing the brewing process with the sterilizing and just the yeast, no lactic acid.
Yep.
I don't know if I'm just imagining it, but it feels like you have less of that pear and citrus character and more, as you said, stony fruit character.
Yeah, and that's coming from the yeast. And the reason for that is the yeast is not having to compete with anything. So when you've got lactobacillus and yeast, they will compete towards the end of the fermentation. And of course, a lot of distillers will say that the late lactic fermentation is really important, because it gives you the full attenuation, which is the full consumption of all the sugars and turning them into alcohol. We don't get that. So interestingly for us, our fermentations stick a little bit towards the end, and we don't extract all of the sugar from the fermentation.
Really?
We don't. But for me, that's a compromise that we make, because flavour for us is the most important thing.
But you're still coming out with 9%. I've seen 8.5.
Yep.
So
it's, we're running just over standard gravity of 1, so it's like 1.02.
okay.
We don't drop under.
that is cool.
And we've got this currently maturing in the warehouse.
I'm going to try it.
Go for it. In ex-bourbon and also ex-Oloroso sherry.
It's different fruity than most of the spirits that I've tried yet, but it has a good amount of sweetness.
It's also, for 63.5%, it coats your palate.
Yeah.
It's got an oiliness, a viscosity. It doesn't immediately lift off and blow your head off, which is really important. I mean, obviously, your nose is your most important asset when you're appraising a whiskey, but flavour, once you get past your nose, how does it feel in your palate? How does it feel on your tongue? How does it feel in your mouth? That's what's really key. So we've got a real nice oiliness that sits with a heaviness on the palate, and that's
also
contributing
maltiness and the marzipan note.
Yeah,
it's strange. It's a very versatile new make. Very well done.
Yeah.
But I've seen all your equipment. I wonder how many new makes you had to nose and taste.
Yeah, and we're just about to start a new, as I mentioned, we're going to start a little bit of a new exploration into yeast. So we're going to be combining different strains of yeast in the next few weeks to understand, if you take a rum yeast and a whiskey, traditional whiskey yeast, what does that do? We've got red wine. We've got lots of different iterations, and we're working with some of the best yeast experts in the industry to help navigate us through this as well. So we believe that great whiskey starts at fermentation. It can be definitely enhanced during maturation and the distillation process, but if you don't have a great fermentation, the quality will not be where you want it to be.
Yeah, I think if you're attached to a brewery, then yeah, fermentation is taken a lot more seriously.
Very seriously, yeah. So that's our single malt. We'll move on to our single rye, our single grain. So this is just under 70%, 69% rye, which is incredible. We, as you know, previously used to try and lauter our rye mashes, and I think I'll be honest and say it was challenging, right? And the reason it was so challenging is because rye just does not lauter well. The beta glucans, the kind of gluey components that exist within the rye grain, they stick to the bottom of that that lauter tun, and you just cannot drain, and you cannot get your wort to run off at a good speed. So it took 14 hours the last time to complete the mash, which was crazy.
Oh yeah.
So this is 70%, and the reason it's 70% is because it's been processed in our mash filter, which is a much more effective system to extract or utilize high rye concentrations in your grain bill. And you can go and have a look at how a mash filter works, but what you'll find is it seamlessly processes those more challenging grains. So this is a little bit of malt barley, just over 10%. Majority is rye, which is just under 70, and then we've got some malted wheat as well in there.
Is it also casking strength?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's definitely, you feel tons of different. I mean, it's a rye new make spirit. I have to say I haven't had that many rye new makes in my glass yet. I think one or two.
The palate though will surprise you. So the nose for me, the nose is quite subtle. There's a bit of spice, there's a bit of fruitiness, but then when it gets onto the palate, it's just it really just explodes in flavour. And then if you breathe out after a sip of this through your nose, you get a lot of stuff going on retronasally, which is really really interesting.
Yeah, it has a lot of volume, has a lot of spices in there, I would say. It doesn't have that forward fruitiness, fresh, and all of that you have in a normal single malt, I would say. Yeah. No, I like that.
We love this. So again, this is double pot distilled rye. Okay, so it's a really important distinction to make between how this is distilled in other Scotch whisky or other Scotch grain whiskies. Okay, Scotch grain whiskey is usually taken up to just over 93% ABV, and that's done through a column still.
So wait, you have rye grain, not malted?
Rye, everything's malted in this.
Okay,
however,
rye malt plus barley malt
plus wheat malt.
Plus wheat malt.
So everything's malt.
And just normal through the process, and then pot stilled.
Pot stilled.
Are you allowed to call it single malt, or what are you allowed to call it?
It has to be grain.
It has to be grain.
Yeah. So grain, single grain, but pot distilled. So what's great about this is I love single grain whiskey.
But still, there's all malt in there.
Yeah.
That should be a new something.
Potentially. But by definition, it's malt barley, right?
Yeah.
So, but what's so cool about this is, and I love single grain, but when you taste a single grain, because of the way they're distilled, they're typically quite muted. Subtle flavors is probably what I would associate with grain.
A bit flatter, I would say, as the malt.
Yeah, approachable. If you're not someone who's maybe too ordained with drinking whiskey, something like a grain is a great gateway whiskey into the world of Scotch whiskey. But for this, what we've done is we've used 2 pot stills to create it. So it's not been rectified to a high ABV. It's only been distilled to 74%, not like most of the grains, which are upwards of.
But I think this is a lot different to grain. This I wouldn't think. Yeah, it has maybe something with a rye whiskey that you'd know from, I don't know, America or something.
Yeah.
But it's still crazy.
Cool.
Nice.
So let's get into some of the older stuff. What we have here is a 4-year-old that's in ex-bourbon, single malt, and how this has been distilled is fairly traditionally. We used Maris Otter barley to make this one. So 100% Maris Otter barley, malted, distilled using a mixture of red wine yeast and traditional M strain, which is just the kind of typical yeast that you would use in the Scotch whisky industry.
What, you used 2 yeasts?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Did you ferment them separately, or?
No, we added a little bit of the red wine yeast first, and then we added the single malt the whiskey yeast. So this is just over 4 years old. It's got a few years left to go. There's a lot of fruitiness from the red wine yeast, as you would expect.
It has a strange fruitiness in there. It's kind of a fresh fruitiness, but
fresh is good.
Sour fruitiness, but not as in sour. That it feels really sour, but
it's like there's a bit of cherry. I find like cherry wood.
I would have said rhubarb, but not as a fresh rhubarb, not one of the really sweet rhubarbs, but one of the more fresher ones.
Rhubarb's a good call, actually. I know you kind of, it's all subjective, but yeah, rhubarb.
It is all subjective.
So this is a really fruit-forward whiskey. What this will go into later on is this will go into sherry, sherry.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll re-rack this into sherry, but because that's the style of whiskey that we will be known for. But this is a great foundation to then layer more flavour on top of. So what yours?
For your whiskey, so it's nice. So
cask strength as well. So
started off just sweet, and then it changed a lot.
Yeah.
But it has something, a little bit of a red wine touch to it. Then a bit of a sour fruity touch to it. It's nice. And this is just a ex-bourbon.
Just the ex-bourbon. So,
but I think you played a lot with the yeast though.
So, but this is the point. This is the point for me. It's like
yeah.
This whole industry is never really understood the value of what yeast can bring to the flavour profile, right? And for me, I said to you earlier on, when you're distilling, right, and this is going to probably downplay our skill sets as distillers, we're only heating things up. That's all we're doing, right?
Okay.
We just heat things up and we cool them down, okay?
Okay.
But what you're doing in that process is during the distillation, you're concentrating all the flavors that you've made from the previous steps, from your milling process, your mashing process, your fermentation process. So when you go in to distill, you can only distill the flavors that you've created. So it stands to reason then, if you have been very careful about the flavors that you're creating, then you can create different flavors depending on the ingredients you use. Yeah. A lot of people would say the distillery character is a big part of what creates the flavor profile, and that is arguably true. But for us, our distillery character will be the fact that we use our sherry casks and port wine casks at the end of the process, but all the way in the run up to that, you're changing little things to optimize the flavor profile. And we will have, of course, a whiskey that is in our core range for a single malt, which will be, what people can come back to and expect the same experience every time. But then, as I said to you, we've got about 10% of our warehouse, which is just, okay, well, if we change that, what happens to the flavour? If we do this, what happens to the flavour? What if we turn that dial? What does that do to the flavour? That's where we will learn a lot, and hopefully we will excite whiskey drinkers by giving them new expressions based on little changes that we've made to the process that they know really well, but maybe haven't thought about that process in that way before because they've not been challenged.
Yeah, it's great. With this distillery, you don't have really like a tradition that hinders you to move on.
No.
Yeah, that is the thing. And what interests me is you kind of got into the brewing, and there was no distillery. You set up a distillery where there was brewing. How was that? Because of the brewing they have similar steps there, but they're a bit different. So how was it to be the distiller in the brewery?
It was lonely. No, I joke. Martin Dickey, the co-founder of BrewDog, he actually wanted to be a distiller before he got into beer.
Oh, okay.
So he had many holidays as a child on Orkney and visited Highland Park quite a lot. And he got excited by Highland Park's whiskies and then went to study brewing and distilling in Edinburgh at Heriot-Watt University, with a view to, once he completed that course, to then go and become a distiller in Scotland. It's quite difficult to get a job in distilling in Scotland.
Oh, really?
Yeah, as a distiller, yeah. So whilst he wanted to do that immediately, he took a job as a brewer. And, the rest is history. But I've always had an advocate and a friend in him because he understands great whiskey.
Yeah, but now you moved out because you've been in the brewery and now you still work together with all the fermenting and the mashing.
It's really important that, like, for me, we utilize the expertise in that side of our business as well. We've got some phenomenally talented brewers and technical experts. So if I've got a question around, okay, I'm thinking this flavour, I'm thinking that flavour, how do you think we could best go about achieving that? Okay, well, we could do this. So it's really collaborative in that sense, because I wouldn't claim to be an expert brewer. I'm definitely not an expert brewer, but those guys are. So we can collaborate to really create some awesome wash recipes to then bring them into the distillery and make some excellent whiskey.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I've never seen any still room that was as versatile as that one.
So next we have a single malt, which has been an ex-Oloroso sherry.
Ooh. Oh yeah, that is an Oloroso.
So very dark, fruit forward. You know the classic descriptions for Oloroso, but we've got subtleties in there that come from the grain and the yeast. This was an ale yeast that we used, very typical ale yeast. There was nothing massively fancy about this process or this recipe. It was pretty standard. We just didn't use any distilling yeast to do the fermentation.
What I think is very difficult now that you've tried a lot to keep track of that. When you've produced something, do you like write down the notes and how it feels and how it tastes and all of that?
Yeah, we've got that library. Yeah.
Okay. Are you going to do the blending then as well, or how are you going to approach that when you come to the final product?
We'll do the blending for sure. Yeah. So, like, for us, what's going to be cool is we'll be one of the only distilleries in Scotland that has grain and malt. So we could do a blend of the two, which will be really cool. But what we're excited about is taking all of the casks that we've got from each of the different styles, and then bringing something together which is phenomenal.
I think the blending will be a bit difficult. I would be a bit afraid of that.
No, we're really excited about it. This has got great sweetness, this whiskey. Great sweetness.
Ooh, but it also has a bit of a strength, volume, bit of a, I don't say a bit of sweetness, it feels like bread.
Bready?
It feels like a bread, like a dark sourdough bread for me.
Great.
But it has also, at the very back of my mouth, the front is a lot of dried fruits, a lot of Oloroso character. But it's a strange Oloroso. So this really feels pretty much done. When can we expect the whiskey?
Oh, you think so? That's awesome. So, not to be cliche, but we're getting to a point where in the next sort of 12 to 24 months we'll be in a position where we think we could release a small batch. I said to you earlier, one of our big challenges is that we have, a brilliant gin, vodka, and rum that we make. And over the last 4 years, the capacity of the distillery has been, unfortunately, focused on making those. And that's why we moved into this building, because we wanted to expand our capacity, and that's our new wash still there, which is 10,000 litres. And that has allowed us to really turn the taps on making our whiskey. So going into next year, we'll be producing close to 250,000 litres of alcohol a year. So we'll have that consistency of production, which is incredibly important. But up until the point where we can unlock that, we'll be releasing small batches, probably 1,000 bottles, maybe a bit more, to just get people, acquainted with us and a bit excited about what's to come.
I think I'm going to be excited about what the small batch is going to be like, and I think a lot of our viewers will also be into that.
Amazing.
Because we have a lot of malt heads out there, a lot of experts out there who are really into a bit of that experimental stuff.
Tremendous. So these two here I'd probably class as slightly experimental, right? So we were in the warehouse earlier. I took you through I explained to you one of the casks, one of the tricks that we use. So virgin oak is a really interesting cask when it comes to how it influences the flavour of your whiskey. Virgin oak means that it has never held any liquid before. It's very punchy. All the flavours are still trapped in the wood, and as soon as you put anything into that, they're all going to rush out and influence to the max the flavour.
A big additive maturation.
Yes, and that's fine in bourbon, which is obviously their whole industry is built on virgin oak.
Yeah.
And for us, we charred, I think this to char 4, which is a pretty high char.
I can see that.
You can. For those at home, there's a bit of charcoal in the glass.
It's unfiltered.
Yeah. And this is then before we filled it with whiskey, single malt, we put vodka in there.
Okay. Yeah.
So we put in the vodka and we rested it for, I think it was 8 months. And the vodka was like sacrificial. We sacrificed the vodka to get great whiskey. And the reason we did that is because we wanted to just take some of the big aromas or the big flavours out of that cask, because we didn't want to overpower the whiskey. So when we took the vodka out, it was this colour, and it was 8 months, right? Okay, it was so dark. You could just see all the tannins had come out of the wood, all the big flavour compounds had been removed. And then what we did was we put our whiskey in there. Now, you're still going to get a lot of the big a lot of the virgin oak flavour coming into the whiskey. Vanillas, creme brulee, coconut, etc. The ones you'd expect. But it's not as intense. Because if we just put this into fresh virgin oak, all you'd be tasting is the oak, basically.
Yeah.
I get a lot of, it's almost nuttiness, a little bit of peanut, bit of obviously whiskey lactone, coconut, but then a lot of maltiness in this as well. But this is just virgin oak. Now you would never normally release something that's only been in virgin oak, because it's a challenging flavour profile.
You have to like it. I'm really a fan of virgin oak, but a lot of people don't like it too much.
So what I find with virgin oak is it's sometimes a bit one-dimensional. So this I'm getting a good amount of caramel and burnt sugar, toffee on the palate, but there's no real, for me, there's not much deviation between the arrival and the finish. It's just kind of the same. Tastes great, but there's the complexity. So if you imagine taking this, and we will do this at some point, and we're just giving you guys an insight into some of the casks that we've got in our warehouse. This isn't stuff that we're going to launch, but if you imagine you take that and maybe you drop that a little bit of this into a vintage port cask. You just build in flavour and complexity on top of this. So it's a great base, but it's not the finished product.
Yeah, I like it. So is there a term for that, for this sacrificial vodka to take out of it? So do you call it still a virgin cask, or do you call it I think it's not been that much done yet.
Should we decide what it's going to be called? now?
I don't know.
Because ex-vodka doesn't sound too sexy.
Yeah, it doesn't.
We could call it the almost virgin oak cask.
Almost virgin oak cask, yeah.
The nearly a virgin oak cask. But yeah.
I like it.
Great.
I like it. It's, but it has a nice bourbon touch to it.
As you would expect,
too,
yeah.
But not too hefty, minus the, I would say, the corn.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I
what
guess
it's supposed to be.
I get, because for me, single malt or malt barley, in comparison to corn, it doesn't have the same level of intensity from a flavour perspective. You don't get as much intense flavour out of barley as you will corn.
Mm-hmm.
So bourbon you make is very challenging.
Mm-hmm.
But because it's going into virgin oak, it's well paired because the intensity of the oak, the intensity of the new make, they work well together.
And you have an intense bourbon.
Exactly. But when you've got an intense oak and then not such an intense barley spirit, there's a mismatch, right?
Yeah.
So that's why we kind of brought the oak intensity down just so it was on the same level as the barley.
De-intensify the virgin oak. I think the marketing team has to decide.
Yeah, we'll put that brief to them and see what they come up with. Last but not least, we have, I think this is 5 years old. So I told you earlier on about the
This is round already.
Yeah, the challenge that we had with the rye spirit that we lautered.
Okay.
So we had 30% of the grain bill was malted rye.
Yeah.
And it took about 14 hours for this to.
Where you had the
run
dough.
off. Yeah, it was like it's a mixture of like wallpaper paste and dough. So we got a very small amount of yield out of this because we couldn't get as much wort out as we wanted. But what we got was pretty tasty. And then what we did was we double pot distilled it and then put it into an ex-red wine cask from France, from Burgundy.
30% rye red wine cask from Burgundy. Interesting choice.
Yeah. So red wine casks are typically quite challenging to work with. If they're not really fresh, then I struggle. So we make sure that we make the spirit, and as soon as the cask arrives, we fill.
How big is your spirit vat?
The one we've got, I think it was about, at the time it would have been about 3,000 litres.
Okay.
So we had this spirit ready to go, the cask landed, all hands on deck, filling these casks as quick as possible because they'd emptied them a week and a half before.
Transport.
And then transported to Scotland. And that's key. Anytime you work with wine, if I could, I'd drive all the spirit to France and fill the cask there because they have to be as fresh as possible.
Okay.
So this is quite a...
This is unusual. It's hard to find the flavor descriptions for that because it's a bit off from what we usually have.
Well, first of all, it's a grain whiskey.
Yeah.
But it's a pot distilled grain whiskey.
Yeah, but it's a grain whiskey made of malt.
Malt and 70% malt,
Yeah.
malted barley, 30% malted rye. So, in terms of Scotch whiskey, where does this sit?
I don't know.
Who knows?
Off the chart.
Exactly. But it's still Scotch, which is important. So by all the definitions and all the legislation, this is still a single grain Scotch whiskey.
No. Sláinte.
Sláinte.
Is this really casking strength?
Yep. 16.
Oh, now it comes. Whoa, okay, this builds quite a lot. Beginning was a bit fresh, I didn't expect that, and now here comes the whole wine cask
At the
spiciness.
back, the wine cask at the back is phenomenal.
But it feels like a bit of one of these hefty red wines with that hefty spicy touch to it.
Big Burgundy wine.
Yeah, Burgundy wine, yeah. My father used to, likes that kind of wine.
I mean, for me, like that wine and also Italian big reds, Valpoliccias and Barolos, amazing.
How old is that?
I think it'll be just over 5 years.
Just over 5. Feels a bit older.
Yeah. Well, remember we've got that the maturation warehouse, which, pardon me, is entirely environmentally controlled.
So we have to talk about how warm did you put it?
So we've probably averaged about 22 degrees Celsius over the last 5 years in that space, just year round. But we take it up for periods of time, so 6 to 9 months. We'll elevate the temperature to around about that 26, 27 degrees Celsius. But then the humidity is so important. The humidity is the most important thing for maturation of any spirit. High humidity means that you will preferentially lose water. Sorry, high humidity means you'll preferentially lose ethanol or alcohol into the atmosphere, because if you've got high humidity, the water in the surrounding in the warehouse, the vapor content in the air is very high. So there's not much more room for water to evaporate. So you lose alcohol preferentially. But what that does, it's not great for yield, but what it does, it creates a softer spirit. Okay. So I've been to countries before where they've got maturation warehouses in very, very dry heat. So humidity's low, but it's really hot. And in those environments, you lose water out of the cask.
It's crazy in America, in the top warehouses, and in these desert or not tropical but desert countries, they have rising ABVs, and it's crazy.
Yeah, and some of the spirit that they make is great, but for me, when you're losing water, there's a slight harshness that starts to creep into the flavor profile. A bit of heat, a bit of burn. So what we like to do is keep the humidity high, 70 to 75%, which is very unlike Scotland. And that, along with a little bit of elevated temperature, we get a beautiful maturation environment, which is perfect for our whiskey and our rum.
Really? I thought Scotland was, look outside, I thought it was like really humid.
Well, it's humid, but like when it comes to certain warehouses, they don't necessarily retain the humidity. There's sometimes, like, dunnage warehouse is very humid, right? So traditional dunnage warehouse is extremely humid. But palletized warehouses,
Brack warehouses,
they're not
higher them.
Yeah, they're not going to be that humid. So dunnage, great, love dunnage. It gets a bit difficult to kind of expand that, but we've got an environment where we can control it to the exact percentage that we want in terms of humidity, and also to the specific temperature that we want. So we really are controlling the process. Really interesting.
See, that just gives me. I think I've learned a lot today. I visited, I don't know, probably 200 distilleries now. And then I thought I knew it all, but today I learned a lot.
Well, what we need to do is make sure when we come back when we have the launch and the distillery is in full swing next year, you come back, the warehouse will be probably on a heat cycle, so you can walk in there with your shirt off and talk to all of your fans.
Have some of your rum.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll make a few pina coladas. But yeah, the whole warehouse has been designed, and the whole distillery has been designed so that we are really custodians of the flavor creation at each stage, and that's something that's really important to us.
I think when you have 10 more years, you could write a big distillation encyclopedia
Manual of how we did it.
Did you studied brewing and distilling?
I did for a year at Heriot Watt, but my background is in chemistry.
In chemistry,
yeah,
okay.
Master, did an undergraduate in chemistry.
But did your old professor knock on your door already?
No, there's
because I think you could do a lot of science around here as well.
I was a terrible student because I just wanted to speed up the process of getting into a distillery.
Okay.
So all the other stuff that didn't involve distillation in my course, I wasn't really interested in.
Okay.
But then once I left my undergraduate, and once I graduated, I went to Heriot Watt to study brewing and distilling, and that was where I really fell in love with the process and got curious about how you can influence flavor is probably the best way of describing it.
I mean, I think you have it pretty down already. I'm really excited about when you come out with the whiskey, because I'd really like to see what you then think is marketable.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we'll have, as I mentioned, we'll have the core range where people can come back to year on year and expect the same experience. But then that little 10% where we're sat in a room with the distilling team and we're going grain, yeast, distillation, casks, maturation, climate and environment. Where can we pull different tunes or flavors out of each of these processes? And we do that regularly, but we'll be doing it more as we go into next year. And the next year is really important because we will have much more volume being produced.
Oh, yeah.
So the amount of experimentation we can do will be larger.
Yeah, I think the end. It's definitely not the end of the story here. I think we'll have a tons to experience in the future.
For sure, 100%.
Yeah. So thank you very, very much. I've learned a lot today.
Great.
About how you can actually do whiskey a bit differently. And yeah, so thank you very much for watching. And stay tuned at Whisky.com and Whisky.de, because we will be launching the BrewDog whiskey as well. As you come out, we will definitely sell that. So have a look at our website. Stay tuned in our newsletters. We will definitely have them in there. And yeah, so thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.